and welcome again to Leaders Uncut. This is Catherine Oaks, your host. And today it is my great pleasure to have with us Marylene Delbourg-Delphis. Hi, Marylene, how are you today? Comment ça va? Marylene is French too. That's why I'm speaking French to her.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. Well, I want to describe you and introduce you. You are a serial CEO. But let me go through everything that you've done because I think it's important to let people know. You are a graduate of l'École Normale Supérieure, which is one of the best business schools in France. You hold a doctorate in philosophy and minors in formal logic and history of sciences. You studied with Stanford professor Michel Serres, who is also a French academician, right? You have written several books, and I'd love you to speak about these several books on fashions and fragrances. And you have a new book that just came up that I'm sure you're going to talk about in 2008, and that's huge. You were awarded the French Légion of Honor, Légion d'honneur. Wow! It's the highest order of merit for military and civil accomplishments. And of course, you are a serial technology entrepreneur, and you've been doing this for 30 years, during which you have empowered many organizations to continuously reshape their future by creating breakthrough platforms and applications as their full-time CEO. So, wow, I mean, what have you not done, Marylene? Because that's just such an impressive background. Wow.
Well, thank you. Well, there are probably many things that I haven't done.
Yeah.
Uh, I I always make sure that I was guided by things that were really important to me and interesting to others. True, my background is quite diverse, but in a way, it's not uncommon. Okay. When you become an entrepreneur, it it can be that can be a break from what you have done before. Okay, so even though my background is very diverse, it may not be as unusual. There are many entrepreneurs who studied philosophy and turn out to be great entrepreneurs. So,
Yeah, no, true. But I mean, it's still, you probably have used, there's some right there, but I have not met too many people like you. The first time I spoke with you, I was just dumbfounded. So tell us about fashion, because I know a lot of people love fashion, and I know you've been highly involved in the fashion world.
well, it was a little bit by accident. When I was very young, I had finished my PhD very early, and I realized I wouldn't be a professor at the university anytime soon. And when you are 24, 25 or so, being 40 seems like being very old, right? So at the same time I was teaching philosophy, I decided to address a domain that was a little bit discarded in France at the time, fashion. Um, and for me, it was very important because as a philosopher, I could speak of everything, understand everything, but I didn't know much.
Mm.
And looking at fashion industries, just looking at people, at the way they behave, at things. So it forced me to become more precise in my perception of the world. And
Mhm.
I really like the fact also that the changing aspect of fashion is a great intellectual stimulant, I would
Mm.
say.
Mhm.
So I became a journalist for various magazines and journals, and it went very well. Then I realized that there were very few books on the history of fashion, especially at the time in French. And we're speaking of the early 90s, early 80s, sorry. And I wanted to write a book that was not a coffee table and
Mm.
explain the complexity of the fashion world. So it was called Le Chic et le Look. It doesn't exist in English. And then I met a lot of phenomenal people like Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Wow.
Um, and I did write a book about him, the first book about him.
He's one
Uh,
of my favorite designers. I just love Jean-Paul Gaultier's fashion style.
yeah, and in fact, I met him at a time he was not known. And
Mm.
actually, my book started with Who knows Jean-Paul Gaultier? Nobody. And uh,
Oh.
a few months later, he, I mean, he could break through.
Yeah.
And this was a great friendship. And I learned a lot in the history of how you become a fashion designer, how you become an entrepreneur in fashion.
Hmm.
At the same time, I was working on the fashion industry and wrote another book about dandies, and about trends, and all sorts of things. I was very productive, actually. I discovered the history of perfumes, and perfumes were very much part of the fashion world for decades, literally. And so I worked on the history of perfume, and for that I needed a database. And there were not much at the time because it was the beginning of personal computing.
Mm.
So I ended up creating a database company, starting with my research on the history of perfume.
Yeah, I mean, that's what every philosopher does, right? Write a database company, create a database company, right? I mean, wow.
Yes, yes, and no. I mean, yes. I mean, it's unusual. That's true.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think the important aspect is that I realized that if I needed a database, a lot of people would actually need databases
Mm-hmm.
to manage even simply the address book, their relationship with people, and to manage all sorts of things. And it was very generic. It was not, even though it was triggered by my interest in the perfume industry, it was not specific to the perfume industry. So this is how I became a software publisher. At the
Oh.
time, database were starting. It was speaking of the mid 80s. I mean, they had started, modern database had started in the early 80s. And so that's how it happened. So I became an entrepreneur without really thinking of it. I
Mm.
didn't pick up one day, oh, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And so when I started, I knew nothing about the business world. My only knowledge of business was the business of fashion, but it was more the aesthetics of fashion, the behavior around fashion, and not so much the business. So I learned the business in the story. And
Ah, wow. So when did you come to the United States? Because you worked in the fashion world in Paris, in France, you learned about perfumes there. What triggered the move?
so I started the database company in France.
Okay.
And very soon I realized the French market was a little small because I bootstrapped. At the time, um, there were very few VC. I don't even think there were VCs in France. And anyway, I didn't know you could start a company and ask for money to do it. So
Mm.
I had no idea
What a
about it.
concept, right?
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know you could be paid to do what you wanted to do.
Mhm.
And on top of this, I doubt that anybody would have given money to a woman anyway. So
True at that time, yes. It's even hard
and,
now, but yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
and it's not. I mean, it's slightly better now, but it's not fantastically better.
Yeah.
So somebody at Apple noticed the product, and they were interested into talking more with us. And so I came to Silicon Valley in '85. Apple became a distributor for the international version of the product. And,
Mm.
but I realized that Apple, it was a great experience, but at the same time, Apple was not in the database world. Uh, Apple was more in the document
Mm.
world
Mm-hmm.
and not databases. So I decided with my colleagues that we should create a company here in Silicon Valley. So that's how I ended up being probably one of the very first European women to start
Mm.
the company here. I was lucky that Guy Kawasaki, who was then the Macintosh evangelist,
Yeah.
uh, was liked the product and he joined me.
Well, I mean, what a thrill it must be to have someone like Guy Kawasaki on your team.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. The interesting part, I did not realize that Guy Kawasaki was so famous because he was
Oh.
not very famous in France. So when I asked him to join, I had no idea how famous he was.
Mm.
And what is striking is that however famous he was extremely humble.
That's the
And
sign of smart people, right?
exactly, he didn't tell me, what, do you realize who I am?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So this was a very positive collaboration. This gave him the taste of managing companies. And this also was a great help for me because he knew the vernacular of the Silicon Valley, all the,
Mm,
and I realized that as bright as I was, okay, um, I was not part of that world,
mm,
and I had to learn.
mm.
So it helped my learning curve, and that's why when you start a company in Silicon Valley, I always recommend to people to really try to understand what Silicon Valley is. At
Mhm.
the time, there was probably a big gap between what had done in France and Silicon Valley, but it's still true today. You
Yeah.
have to learn to understand the context
Mhm.
where into which you step. So it was very important. It, this helped me a lot. In turn, I think that this was good for him. And given that I had written books on the history of fashion and fragrance, he too wanted to write books. So I gave him he credits me now and then of giving him the virus of writing. And,
I love it. I love it. Wow.
and he did write his first book when he was still with our database company. It was called The Macintosh Way.
Okay.
And then he left to become a writer, a VC, and did a lot of things. But he has remained an amazing friend. And
Yeah, I can imagine that's so critical when you arrive in a new country and you have to immerse yourself in a new culture and integrate
exactly,
yourself new
exactly,
the standards too, because that is important. But and imagine and having a network makes a whole difference, right?
absolutely. And this is something we often underestimate when we come to a different country. And this is still true today. And in fact, in my book, Beyond Eureka, I have several chapters on the importance of building a network and
Mm,
being part of a club, basically, because Silicon Valley is a big club of knowledge, of
mhm.
money, and getting to do this is just more than just making connection via LinkedIn. Um,
Yes.
so this is still completely fundamental for every single entrepreneur.
And you still see the same environment right now? Is it still very positive for any entrepreneur to come and immerse themselves in the Silicon Valley? Is that still a good place to do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Today, the places where you can start business is far more diversified than it was 30 years ago, okay,
Mm-hmm.
or 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Yet, Silicon Valley remains a place of choice because there are so many entrepreneurs. You learn so much by capillarity.
Mm,
Think of the number of meetings around AI, for example.
yes.
One of them is organized. One of these meetings are often organized by Jeremiah Young, and I mean, in just 1 month, he is probably organizing. There are probably more meetings about AI in 1 month in Silicon Valley than in the entire countries
Mm-hmm.
in one
Mm-hmm.
year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's impossible not to learn.
Right.
It's impossible not to see. On top of this, people say what they are doing.
Mm,
And so it gives you ideas. It enables you to validate your ideas or oppositely to realize that maybe you're not completely in the right space or whatnot. So there's so much knowledge here
mm-hmm.
that it's hard to beat.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
there are lots of wonderful startup nation and lots of phenomenal initiatives all over the world, starting in France, for example, with Station F. But the scale of what's happening in Silicon Valley is huge. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
On top of this, there is so much money in Silicon Valley.
Mm,
There are so many connections, so many VCs, many connections between people People who start companies become VC, become LPs in VC firm. So it's a whole environment. And on top of this, Silicon Valley, and this is a course I like to give very often, Silicon Valley was not born yesterday.
Yes, true.
Energy in Silicon Valley is an energy that started over 100 years ago.
Okay. All right.
With a telegraph company. So the accumulation of knowledge is simply astounding. Okay.
Yeah. Well, like we say, it's what you know may be important, but it's really who you know. And the thing is your network is going to grow 10 times faster if you are around the right people.
Yes. And if you feel, basically smell the same air.
Yes, no, but that's so critical. So, I mean, you've been at the right place. Obviously, you came with some great ideas. You had a great background. How were you awarded the French Legion of Honor? How did that happen? I would love to hear that story.
I don't think there is a story. I mean,
Okay.
I'm nominated by people. And I discovered it by chance, actually.
Okay.
So it's probably the combination of my background, my intellectual background, the books I wrote, that I started a company here very early on, and very few women had done that. Even in France,
very few. Yes.
Even in France, at the time, there was no woman starting a tech company anyway. So it's probably the combination of several factors, and I had no hand in the story at all. So I truly don't know how it happened.
Interesting. So, I mean, I love your story. You were a single mom. You raised your daughter by yourself. You moved to a new country where you knew nobody. You just had a great idea and you made it work. So, tell my audience, what were maybe two of the main roadblocks that you had to overcome on your own, and how did you do it?
There's one thing, I didn't really see the roadblocks. Okay. I knew there were obstacles, but I also knew what I didn't know. So I did not become aggressive or defensive. I knew I had to learn and to go around roadblocks. So I did not experience those roadblocks and overcoming them as a kind of big experience. I knew I was French. I knew that I was a woman. I knew that a French woman was simply not expected. So I was not trying to be a big mouth. I tried to be mindful of the fact that I was a foreigner for people. And by the way, this is still true for every woman. Right? It's still very hard to be a woman. And so you have to listen and figure out a way. And you do eventually figure out the way. You don't need to be aggressive. You have to fight, but you can fight in a non-aggressive fashion. Do I respond to your question?
Yeah, no, this is great. But yeah, I love it. Don't you think it's also important to have the right mentors? I mean, you had great mentors too, right? And is that important still? What do you think?
At the time, the idea of mentorship was not that common, actually. So I would say that Guy Kawasaki was a mentor, but it was more of a collaboration. And so I learned from him, he learned from me. The way I trained myself, I mentored myself by talking to other people. And what I did from the very beginning was to help other entrepreneurs in different spaces. And by teaching others, by understanding others, you learn for yourself.
Yeah, very
true. The best way to learn is to teach.
Very true.
So at the time, it was the idea of executive coaching, mentoring, it was really unusual. I mean, at least I didn't know, okay? I think the principle of mentorship developed only 20 years ago. Okay. Because in reality, I believe that we can learn so much about what we should do, could do by understanding others. And all the people I helped actually did help me because I could hear their problem as business people and then think of the way I would solve them myself, and listen to the way they were solving those problems themselves. So it was kind of interactive executive coaching with a big business aspect. It was not abstract executive coaching. It was business-based executive coaching.
So now you are an executive coach. You are still working, helping many businesses, correct?
Yes, but I blend the notion of executive coaching and management consulting.
Okay.
So instead of listening to people, their problems, and not being like a therapist, basically, right?
Yeah.
I try to be more hands-on with them, and I'm not afraid to tell them what I would think we could. I would think I would do in their shoes, and then by hearing me say what I would do, then they say, well, that's not the way I should do it. And that I give them a way to rebound. And it becomes extremely productive. So executive coaching alone is fine in certain cases. For entrepreneurs or owners of medium-sized company up to 50 or $60 million, they need people who are more feel more involved with their daily problems,
Yeah.
with their daily headaches, because these are not big problems. It's just when you run a company, it's a collection of small headaches, and you need somebody with whom you can bounce ideas, share ideas, and this is not quite the role of advisor, external advisor. It's not the role of a board member. So you need kind of this hybrid creature.
Yeah.
And that's why I said sometimes that I'm a sort of shadow CEO.
Yeah, and that's so important because so many CEOs or business people have been working on their business for years. It's really hard to step back, take a step back, and have a clear picture on exactly what's happening. So having an outsider's point of view here is critical.
Yes, and the ability to share opinions freely, and the ability to share headaches freely. Because most of the time, CEOs are stuck because if they don't know something, they tend to think that they should know, or if they don't know, it's ridiculous. And I make sure that the CEOs I help are free to are free to tell me whatever. Nothing is ridiculous. A small problem a ridiculous problem with, say, an employee can poison your day if you don't speak about it with somebody.
Yeah, no, I love this. So I'd love to learn more about you, the book you just wrote, Beyond Eureka.
Yes.
I love the cover. It's just beautiful. And
thank you.
You say it's the rocky road to innovation, and we are in the midst of gigantic innovation right now. Can you tell me a little bit about the areas that you cover in your book that would be of interest?
I cover a lot of areas, and they're all of interest. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
What I try to do is explain that what we know about innovation is a result of over 100 years of innovations. And so the example I take basically start from even before 100 years, start with the first 200 years, basically, with the first industrial revolution. So regardless of the space you enter, innovating is difficult. You start with an idea. You don't know if it's going to pan out. And the way you start, what you have to do depends on where you sit in what I call the innovation stack. If you start at the very beginning of a trend, you are part of a huge number of people doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you are thrown into a very hyperactive bubble, and you know what competitors, possible competitors, are doing. So you are supposed to be extremely agile because customers don't really exist at this stage. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, this is the field being formed. So you need to be extremely agile, extremely interested by everything that moves.
Mm.
At the same time, you need to keep sight of the fact that you have to survive for years, because no innovation happens in 2 or 3 years. Okay,
Right.
usually it's several years, and
Yeah.
if you think of AI, it has been 60 years. Okay,
Right.
70 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn how to survive a bubble. You have to learn
That.
when you are at the peak of a bubble and have enough money or enough resources to survive. Then people start to be interested. You have to have enough traction. But to get traction, you have to have enough technology and money and people to
Yeah.
structure the traction.
Yeah.
These are themes I develop in the book. And I also develop all these themes in my newsletter on LinkedIn, which I call Innovator Panorama.
Oh yes, I've seen that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I take specific uh, thematics, basically.
Yeah,
And
no, that's such critical information, because I think more and more people are interested in working for themselves, in developing new ideas, launching new concepts, utilizing AI, using new technologies. So you see a lot of new businesses flourishing right now. And as we know, what's the percentage? 90% of them won't make it,
exactly.
right?
But you have to know that it's very hard.
Yeah.
There's, it's one thing to create a pizza shop at the
Yeah.
corner of the street where you know what kind of customers you're likely to have. And it's a whole different story to create an AI agent to optimize sales. Because first, there are hundreds and hundreds of other entrepreneurs doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The likeliness for you to succeed is small, but you have to believe in the idea.
Yeah, I mean, don't you think you also have to be mentally and physically very healthy, very strong in order to make it?
Definitely. You have to be resilient.
Yeah.
You have to be comfortable with uncertainty. And
Mm.
this is a section I develop, an aspect I develop a lot in the book. Yes.
Yeah, that's one thing that Elon Musk said, because I've been, of course, watching Elon Musk. He's been somebody I've admired all my life, but he always said, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a high resilience for pain, right?
Yeah.
A high, what's the term? It's not resilience, but the ability to manage or to live pain on a daily basis for long periods of times.
That's
Yeah.
right. One of the nicest, in a recent post actually on LinkedIn, I mentioned a video of Jensen Huang,
Mm.
who is the founder of NVIDIA.
Mm.
He expresses this pain extremely well, in a very human fashion. He's not bragging about it.
Yeah.
Um, this was part of a talk that he gave to a commencement talk in Stanford. And you have to know that you are going to go through very painful moment, but you have to also build on that pain. Okay? Get used to it.
Oh, okay. And so how do you do this? What's the best way to do this?
To solve problems as they go,
Okay.
first off, and not let problems accumulate.
Okay.
Make sure that you discuss every problem that occurs, you discuss with your team. And don't take everything personally.
I love that one.
That's very important. And then it takes me to a different topic. Make sure that you have a team of people who can put your head straight on your shoulder and are not afraid to talk to you. Also, in many situations, CEOs tend to want to have people around them who would share the same ideas and so forth. I mean, be very careful. You want people who are strong-headed and are not afraid to tell you the truth.
to tell you as it is, right? You have a lot of yay-sayers, and people who are naysayers are often not part of those teams.
Exactly. So you can share the pain, and then you have several people kind of highlighting possible directions.
Yeah.
It's the important thing is it's to feel it, to feel very committed personally, but not to suffer endlessly.
Yeah.
Not to internalize too much.
And they say in order to be a great CEO and great entrepreneur, you have to have a high ego. I said, yeah, maybe, but you also have to have high humility levels, because if you have too high of an ego and you think you know it all, then you cannot be humble.
And, people who have too much ego don't feel pain.
Oh.
They don't even see it.
And so maybe that's why. All right. That makes sense.
Don't feel pain, but they also fail.
Mm-hmm.
They can be very inattentive. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have a big ego, that's true, but it's important to have both extreme, big ego and big humility.
Yes.
Because
wow. Yeah.
You balance them out.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that then the traits that you have seen in most famous entrepreneurs, most business people? I mean, is that the case of the biggest founders of the world? Is that the way they were, you think?
Many of them.
Mm-hmm.
They had big egos. Think of the Edison, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. Yeah. But at the same time, they were great listeners.
Oh, okay.
Observing the world around themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important. They were also extremely cultivated.
Yeah.
Because when you are extremely cultivated, your ego is actually fed by knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay. You have the egomaniac style kind of mythomania, right? But you have people with a large ego, but they are very, very educated.
Yes.
Eager to learn. So these are different people.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody like Steve Jobs was always eager to learn. I mean, look at Bill Gates. I mean, one of the most incredible entrepreneurs actually of the 20th and 21st century is Bill Gates. He is very, very cultivated. He's interested by so many different domains. So this gives him an amazing agility.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, you have to have a curious mind. You have to be willing to learn. You have to be thirsty for knowledge consistently, right? So, yeah.
You have to be able to shift your mind to have mental agility is critical. And you don't have real resilience if you don't have extreme mental agility.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be adaptable too. I mean, in your case, you had to be adaptable. You're coming to a new country. You have to learn everything. So I think that ability to adapt quickly to any situation is critical, right?
It is critical to have this ability to adapt.
Yeah.
And it's critical also to understand customers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you think of your product in general and say, well, look how great I am, look how great my product is, you don't listen to your customer. So before you sell anything, let your customer talk.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, when you let your customer talk, you have they sell you on your own product.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's scary for a lot of people to do this, right? Because they're afraid of the feedback they're going to get.
Yes, but if the feedback is negative, thank your customer because you can press.
Yeah, fascinating. So Marylene, if someone is interested in working with you and connecting with you, what's the best way to do this?
Via LinkedIn, I respond.
Okay.
Very quickly, and if I don't respond within 24 hours, send me a second email.
Okay, all right, wonderful. So the last question I'm going to ask you is if you had something to share that would be inspirational for women specifically, because we all know it's really hard for women to become entrepreneurs, to be successful as entrepreneurs. What would be the one thing you would like to tell them?
We can have it all.
Aha! I love it. I love it. That's true, right? We are our own worst enemies, and we are setting our own barriers to entry, right?
Exactly.
I
The
love
doors,
it.
the doors are open, enter the room.
Even if you come from other countries, which happens a lot. I mean, I've been speaking with women from India and from Russia, and from France, and even Africa. I see women coming with really nothing much in their pockets, and they just had the determination to do something with their lives. So with a great idea.
In all cases, though, remain kind to people.
Oh, see, that too is very, very important.
It's very critical.
Yeah.
Because when you step into a different universe, you have to listen to who people are and how they can feel.
And not be afraid to give, right? Because that's a
Definitely.
thing, very often thing, and especially I think we're women, I think, are afraid to appear weak if they are too kind, or maybe communicating something that then they don't want to communicate.
So don't be afraid to come across as weak. Because most of the time, people who look at you as being weak are not so strong themselves.
Oh, wow, you touch a chord there. Yes.
And so what? Okay, this is their problem. It's not your.
It's their problem. It's not your problem. So don't be afraid of any of that, and anything is possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marylene. It was just so wonderful speaking with you today. You are such an inspiration. I spoke with you a couple of weeks ago, and I was working on a specific project, and you gave me some hint on something that I did not think about, and that was just so precious. And I know you can do this for a lot of people. So don't just, please talk to Marylene, because she's just a wealth of knowledge, information, and passion and energy, and wow, it's so refreshing. So don't hesitate to connect with Marylene and share her story, share our video here, because she's somebody absolutely unique and incredible and wonderful and kind, and such a blessing to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I feel almost embarrassed.
No, my God, it's just
reaching out, because I really admire that you did reach out of the blue. And
yeah.
I mean, I respond when people...
Well, I knew there was something there, and I didn't know that it would be all of that. So thank you again, Marylene. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, because you help us out, continue doing what we're doing. We're doing this just to help others so that they can gain more exposure, develop the brand awareness, and share the good. That's the goal here. So thank you again, and we will see you next time.
Okay.